In a few seconds, I'll be explaining a new way to ideate through gamification technique that is fast and inexpensive. I'll be joined by my partner, Michael Cisnowski.
Hello.
Who's going to explain an important element of this approach. So just a bit of housekeeping. You can submit your questions via the chat function. Generally, I prefer to wait until the end to answer questions, but if something comes up that I think reflects an important point that I may not have clarified well, I'll certainly interrupt for that. But in any case, feel free to submit questions throughout, and we'll get to as many of them as we can at the end. Our goal is to get through the formal presentation within 20 minutes, and then deal with as many questions as we can in the remainder of the half hour. So since I know a lot of you don't know TRC, I thought I'd spend a minute or two just telling you what I think sets us apart. First of all, as a company, we philosophically believe, we want to help you to get beyond prep, because in the end, people, if you ask them, will say that they want everything. So, good, effective research is going to get to something that's actually useful and actionable that requires people to kind of make the same sorts of trade-offs they have to make in everyday life. We're also firm believers in doing more with less. Obviously, this is important from a budgetary standpoint. A lot of you have your budgets being squeezed and are being asked to do that as a matter of form, but I also think it's important from the standpoint of engaging respondents. We don't want to be asking them questions that are of no value to your ultimate goals and your ultimate business decisions that you have to make. We work across a range of markets, which allows us to learn things from one market that we can bring to other markets. And we have a close connection with academia, and that in turn allows us to bring good ideas from academia into the real world, one of which we'll be talking about today. We work on product research from early stage ideation work all the way through to end stage things like messaging, segmentation, pricing, and product optimization. Today we're going to be talking about something that's in our Agile suite of products, and these were created because the majority of our business is custom market research. But we had our custom market research clients coming to us and saying that they were being asked to do research that not given a lot of time, not given sufficient budget to do it, but recognized that they wanted to do something beyond just, say, doing a couple of in-depth interviews or gathering a group of people internally to make decisions. They felt that it required something more rigorous and thoughtful. And so we created a series of products that typically can be turned around in about a week and for under $10,000, one of which we'll talk about today. And that is IdeaML. And IdeaML is a means to generate ideas, evaluate them, and really help you to kind of cultivate your ideation process all in one step. So any of you who have been doing research for a while have probably at some point asked a question on a survey along the lines of, how could we improve this product, or what could we do to make your relationship with us better, or those sorts of questions. And I'm sure if you've done it, that what you've experienced when you've done that is you've gotten a lot of answers like, I don't know, or give me stuff for free, give me more in the package, charge me less, those sorts of things, none of which is really very helpful to you. So one of the keys to any good ideation process is, how do we unlock the creative juices of your customers or of your prospects in order to get better ideas. And the real key to making that happen is a technique that we created more than a decade ago now called Smart Incentives, which is really the engine that drives our IdeaML product. And so before we go any further and before I talk about how IdeaML works, I think it's very important that you understand how Smart Incentives work. So for that, I'd like to turn it over to Michael Cisnowski, my partner, so that he can explain that.
Sure. I think what I'd like to do, it's important to just take a step back, I think, and just to talk a little bit about what we're trying to do when we apply ideate, or frankly, when we're doing any sort of ideation or even any open-ended question. We're asking people to try and be creative for us. We know, not just as researchers, but as all of us are consumers as well, that's hard work. It's hard to come up with a new thing, particularly in categories that don't feel particularly ripe for new things. And so when we start thinking about smart incentives, what we really want to do is say, how can we change things up for the consumer and make creativity a little less hard, or at least if the same amount of difficulty, make it more worth their while, something they want to do. And so really that boils down to two things. One, you want to incent them, which is typical for surveys, right? We incent participants all the time, but thinking about two things. One, incenting them in a far more significant manner than the normal or the typical survey incentive, just to participate, and to align those incentives with our goals, so that they're being incented to do something, not just to participate, but to do something we would like them to do. The other side of the task or the challenge, we believe, is just making it more interesting, turning being creative, turning the process of answering what is essentially an open-ended question that we're asking people for ideas into something that is a little more gamified, that is competitive, that gives them the drive to want to give you a good idea beyond the money. And so, sorry, there was a little delay there. And so that essentially is what Smart Incentives does. Basically, there's three real aspects to it beyond that incentive, but I'll talk a little more about that incentive. The first thing we want to do is we want to put people, if we're going to make creativity a little less onerous, or trying to be creative, we want to put them in a creative mindset. So depending on the project, you can certainly ask people to do a little mental exercise, like come up with another use for an eraser, or whatever it may be, just to get their juices flowing. Other times it might be providing them with seed ideas, which is something that Rich will get into a little bit when we talk more about Idea Mill. But one way or the other, when we go through a smart incentive process, we want to first bring people into a situation, tell them that, hey, this is more than just a survey. We want you to be a little bit creative. And here's a signal that you're going to have to be a little more creative. The second thing we want to do is, as I mentioned before, we want to align their incentives with what we want them to do. And so, whereas, as I mentioned before, for a typical survey, you may get a few points or $1 of credits for completing a survey. I mean, that's what a lot of the industry is built on. But we're talking about giving people a far more lucrative individual incentive, $100 if you come up with the best idea. And that's the other part of it. So it's not just the incentive is big, but you want to make them, give them the desire to give you ideas, because you want to tell them that they're in a competition, that they have a chance to win it based on how much they think and what they communicate to us, not simply because they showed up to do the survey. Lastly, when we think about how to make this smart incentive process, if you want to have a game, you want to also provide people with the rules of the game so that they know how they can be successful. And so framing the questions are very important in the smart incentive process as well. So we want to be able to tell people, whatever the category may be, specifically what we're looking for, and maybe give them some examples of what we're not looking for, so that they have an idea of, okay, this is an everyday problem, but I see the spin you want on it, or I see the angle that you're looking for. Something that just essentially, if you were playing any game, you'd want to know the rules so that you have a chance to win. So those three things together, the kind of encouraging creativity from the start, providing incentives aligned with what we want to get out of them, a significant one, and then giving them a clear sense of the rules that they need to have in order to potentially win that incentive. Those three things come together is smart incentives. And as Rich said before, it sits at the heart of what makes Idea Mill effective. I'll hand it back to you.
So when we're talking about Idea Mill, what we're talking about is essentially using that smart incentive tool to generate ideas, but in the same step, we're also going to have respondents evaluate ideas. So let's just talk briefly about how it works. the first thing we're going to have respondents do is evaluate ideas that have already been generated. Now, these ideas might have been generated by our clients as seed ideas, as Michael referred to them, or they could be ideas that respondents generated for us. And those ideas might have been generated just 5 minutes earlier. So it's a very dynamic process. Ideas are flowing in, and we're showing respondents pairs of ideas and simply asking them which they like best. After they've gone through the 4 pairs, we then ask them which of those 4 they think is the absolute best idea. And the next step we do here is we're going to then drill down on that idea, and we're going to ask questions about uniqueness, purchase intent, likelihood to share it on social media, relevancy, and so on. So why are we doing that? Well, first of all, the evaluations are useful to us. Getting ideas from consumers is helpful. But what if you had an idea that came in from a consumer? It's pretty easy if one person comes up with an idea to dismiss it and say, that's one person. It's sort of the equivalent of that one person in the focus group who says something clever where, you look at it and go, but I don't know if anybody else really thinks that way. So by bringing in the consumer feedback, you know whether or not this is something that's very unique to that individual or it's something that a lot of people might like. Second, we're immersing people in the process. As Michael said, it's important for them to know the rules. Well, in this case, we've told them the rules because the first thing they did is they evaluated other people's ideas on those rules. And so when we get to the point where we're going to ask them for an idea, they know how that idea is going to be evaluated. They're well aware of the rules. In short, we've really prepared them for creativity and really primed them to give us the maximum possible ideas that they can come up with, because they've totally internalized what it is that we're looking for. And then, and only then, do we turn around and ask them that smart incentive question. And in essence, it really kind of ramps up the competitive aspect of it, because we're telling them your idea is going to be thrown right away to the process, and they've seen other ideas. So all of those competitive juices should really be flowing, quite readily, and we should be seeing the best possible ideas they can come up with. And their ideas are going to flow into the pool of ideas. Essentially, the pool of ideas are the ideas that we're going to be bringing in 8 at a time for each new respondent that comes in. So how do we decide which ideas go into the pool and which ideas come out of the pool? Well, there's really 2 factors to it. One is a fair chance. So we want to try to make sure that every idea is seen enough times that we have an idea of something that's worthy of further evaluation. In other words, I don't want to waste a lot of evaluations on an idea that isn't getting traction, but by the same token, I don't want to allow one respondent to veto an idea. That's no better than taking an idea from one respondent and saying this is the winner without any other feedback. The second side of it is, ideally, I want to take the best ideas, those that are getting traction, those that are winning when those choices are coming up and that are rising to the top. I want to get as much information about them as possible so that I can have a better idea of which ideas really do belong at the top, and I can get a better idea of why from some of those follow-up questions that we ask. So let's talk about what you're going to get with Idea Mill. You will get 150 to 300 ideas, and we will rank order those ideas. That doesn't mean that you should only pay attention to those ideas at the top. It is quite possible that there are good ideas further down that deserve attention and that merit attention. But it does mean that from a consumer perspective, those ones at the top are certainly something you should pay attention to and think about. And I should also mention that while I'm saying you're going to get 150 to 300 ideas, your expectation should not be that you're going to get 150 to 300 totally unique ideas. You're going to get themes that are going to develop in here where people are all talking about solving, for example, the same problem, or things like that, essentially, where there'll be a lot of things that are related. You might even get some identical ideas. And there's nothing wrong with that. Ultimately, our goal is that you should get a dozen or 2 dozen really good ideas that are worthy of further study, meaning these are things that got a lot of mention, that got traction, that are interesting, that seem to have value, that are within your technical capabilities, that are within your positioning, that you want to move forward with. So a couple of quick examples. We just did an IDML following the Olympics to ask people how the coverage of the Olympics could be improved. And on this slide, you'll see there's sort of 5 of these themes that developed. There were more than this, but here's 5. And they range from things that are interesting, but not necessarily, way off the charts unique, like the way you schedule events, having the program guide be different, the way that you show commercials. And by the way, the solutions here were not show me less commercials, because again, that's a pretty obvious idea, but it was ways in which the broadcaster could generate revenue while making the overall viewing experience better. And then you have some ideas that I think are really, really clever, like gamification, like things similar to, say, fantasy football that the NFL does. In other words, a way of bringing the spectator at home into the process even more, into the broadcast more, which I think from a broadcaster perspective would be quite interesting, because I would bet properly executed it would drive more viewership and more interest in perhaps sports that I wouldn't normally be interested in. A second example is a few years ago when we were developing IDML, we did a test case in which we studied driverless cars, which at the time many people had not heard of. Now we're hearing a lot more about them, particularly about driverless cars being involved in accidents and so on. But we wanted to go and do a survey to see whether people could generate ideas about something that they were unfamiliar with. So what we did here, and what we would do in a similar case if you had a problem like this, is we opened the survey with a concept evaluation of the idea of a driverless car. Introduce the concept, ask very basic questions about the concept as you would in any concept evaluation. And we did this because, again, we wanted people to internalize what this new concept was. And then we asked them, how can this be improved? And the answers fell into 3 broad categories, and I would expect this to be the case with any new concept that we're trying to generate ideas to make it better. First of all, there were just expressed concerns about the concept itself. How safe is it going to be, for example? How could we make it safer? Those sorts of ideas. The second thing was ideas in terms of how this product would perhaps revolutionize people's lives. So people who are visually impaired, for example, or people who are afraid of driving while drinking might saw this as a way of improving things. Now that's not really something that the client's going to be able to use, because essentially their base concept is there, but it does tell the client something about how this product might be positioned and implemented. The third group were exactly the kinds of things we're looking for, just off-the-wall ideas in terms of how can this new concept be used. I want the fold flat seats. I want computer network built into it. I want various entertainment packages. The ability to take a nap while I'm on my way to work, whatever it might be. These were really great ideas to sort of take the concept and say, you better make sure that it can do this. What we find IDML excellent for, and our clients have as well, are things like product naming, improving existing products, finding pain points, and this is, we don't necessarily have to come up with ideas. Sometimes just identifying pain points can be hard, and enhancing the internal ideation methods that you already have. What we would need for you in order to implement an IDML is, first of all, who do you want to target? Who are your target consumers? Who is likely to buy this product? Second, we need your help in understanding what kinds of ideas are going to be generated, because that gets back to how we're going to set up the rules, essentially, in terms of how we're going to evaluate the ideas, which in turn is going to set up what kinds of ideas are generated. And we're going to need 8 seed ideas. Now, you can have more than that if you want, but basically, your own answers to the question that will help drive the ideation process. And I should mention, by the way, you have options when it comes to those seed ideas. We can, for example, just use them early on when we don't have any ideas from respondents, and then drop them and not show them anymore. We can keep them in and treat them like we would a respondent idea, meaning some of them are going to stay in the pool and others are going to be shown a certain number of times and then not shown anymore. And we can also keep them as a priority. Maybe you've got ideas that you really like and that you want to see given every opportunity to be evaluated, so we can make sure they stay in the pool and don't get dropped the way that respondent ideas would. So the benefits of Idea Mill are that it's fast, it's rigorous, as I think I've demonstrated, and it's inexpensive. For most consumer audiences, we're going to be able to do it for less than $10,000, and we're going to be able to turn the product around in about a week. So at this point, I'll see if there's any questions.
Yes, we do have one. We have a couple, actually. One is, how did you come up with 8 to evaluate at a time? Why not more or less?
So it's a good question. We did a lot of testing. We actually tried 6 at one point. We tried more. We thought of showing 3 ideas at the same time. We actually even tested, originally we had the idea of maybe showing other people's ideas after to see whether it really did make a difference to show it before. But essentially what we found was 8 was a manageable number for respondents to be able to do without growing bored of the process. So it really is nothing more than that.
Another question. What about very complex products? Would Idea Mill work for these?
Right. So if you had something super complex, like, for example, just to take an absurd thing, if we were trying to figure out how to improve passenger jets, for example, it's very unlikely that your target consumer is going to be able to tell you that, what we need to do is we need to add another turbine and that will cut down on noise or whatever the issue might be. So what I would advise in those situations is to say, let's talk about pain points. What are the things about flying on a plane that you feel like a better design could help with? So whether that is temperature control, whether that is the pressurization of the cabin, or my own personal thing that I don't like when I'm flying is how long it takes before my ears are going to pop. Sometimes in a slow descent it takes a very long time, it's painful and so on. Is there a way to design around that? So that's what I would focus on.
2 more questions.
Okay.
Can this be used for product naming, ideation, and or confirmation?
So it certainly can be used for product naming in terms of coming up with new names and giving you an idea of how respondents view them. In terms of confirmation, I'm assuming you're saying, could we, essentially come out of the process and say this is the absolute best name? I would say you're certainly going to have a pretty good idea of what the best name is, but you have to keep in mind that this product is dealing with hundreds of ideas, and even with the algorithm that we're using to drop people in and out, we're only evaluating them 8 at a time. So you're going to have a limited amount of that confirmation. So would I make a $1 million naming decision based on the results of this? Probably not. Fortunately for you, we do have another product, if you want to check our website out, called Idea Magnet, which is perfect for that. Okay, we're going to do what? One more question?
Time for one more? Okay.
Yeah.
Do we identify the type of consumer to speak to or provide a list of existing customers?
So you can do it both ways. If you have a list of customers, maybe you have an internal panel, we have no problem using that, and it's a perfectly viable means to do it. And in fact, pricing will be a little bit cheaper. If you want us to target consumers, we can do that as well. Through a number of partners that we have. We typically don't have a difficult time, particularly with consumer audiences, finding your target segment to do. And
We have one more. I think we have time for one more.
Yep, I think we're still good.
Can you use this process to determine most valued features of multifaceted solution, or determine what wording that would resonate more effectively?
So I think both of those are probably a different exercise in different product. If you're trying to figure out which features are best, again, we have a product called Idea Magnet, which essentially, you'd give us a list of features, and we're going to run it through a sophisticated, rigorous process just like this that is going to tell you the importance of each feature and how much more important each one is than the next most important feature. So I would use that for that. What was the second part of the question?
The most valued features of multifaceted solution or determine wording that would resonate more effectively.
So from a wording standpoint, again, I tend to think that copywriting is a profession. So I wouldn't necessarily want to go to my customers and say, come up with, how would you word this? I might go to my customers to learn about what ideas for what kinds of themes I want to be talking about. But I think if I'm really trying to figure out the most effective wording, I want to have a copywriter write those. And again, and I do appreciate any questions that allows me to talk about another product is in my opinion, a great question. So we have a product called Message Test Express where you can bring in 16 messages. They could be positioning statements, they could be basic messages, and we're going to be able to narrow down the best one. And that process is set up in a way where, as is typical in a case where maybe you've got 16 different variations on how to describe a particular product, there's likely to be a lot of overlap and a lot of, we're changing this adjective or this phrase. This product is set up in a way where we're going to be able to still tell you that evaluation. And then finally, I'd say that for both of those things, certainly a more custom approach like conjoint analysis might work as well. I think that's all the time we have. If you have any other questions, you have our contact information. Please don't hesitate to reach out and let us know. Really do appreciate you taking the time to be with us today, and happy to follow up and talk about your ideation problem one-on-one and see whether IDEA makes it. Thank you.